our second weekly edition of Ozresistance Roundup. I'm your host, Bill Bibbulmun, also known as the Bibbulmun Whistleblower. Now, today we're going to move straight to the international scene. Alex Jones Infowars, covering the very important New World Order conference going on in Copenhagen, Denmark, the Bilderberg Group. And just read a short script from the Infowars network, and I'd encourage everyone after this show to go and take a look, because it's quite compelling. On this Friday, May 30th edition of the Alex Jones Show, Alex continues his coverage of the globalist Bilderberg confab. Infowars nightly host David Knight and PrisonPlanet.com editor and writer Paul Joseph Watson file reports live from Copenhagen, Denmark. The Infowars team has been harassed and assaulted by Danish cops, who are under orders to maintain tight security as the elite and their hand-picked minions discuss the Ukraine crisis, the economic meltdown, the future of a sustainable middle class, and other issues of import to the public, but are debated and decided in private. Very interesting. Now, back here in Australia, we've had quite an interesting week. And firstly, I'd like to talk about the arrest of Roger Rogerson and Glenn McNamara on what appears to be another bunch of trumped up charges by the New South Wales Police Force. Now, I've got in front of me a review of the book written by former cop Glenn McNamara, a book called Dirty Work. I've got a review in front of me that was published by Whistleblowers Australia's Brian Martin, and it's just a 4-page review, and it's available on the internet, and I'd encourage everyone to have a look and start to get the truth about what's going on with this latest frame-up with McNamara and Rogerson. Now, just reading a couple of things from the review, he gives a detailed account of his efforts targeting pedophiles who manufactured and sold drugs to help maintain their sexual activities with young boys. The pedophiles' lifestyle was expensive because they needed to pay corrupt police for protection. Some of the police were involved in the drug trade too. Well, nothing unusual there for anyone who knows anything about Australian police forces. Then later on, the lesson for whistleblowers is a familiar one. When you expose corruption, expect to be labelled corrupt yourself. Well, one of our colleagues, Robert Paul, CPO, certainly knows all about that. Then later on, McNamara is cynical about media coverage of police corruption. Gee, I wonder why. And following on from that, the lesson from this is not to trust media stories about police corruption. You may be missing the true story. To get something closer to the true story, you need to read books like Dirty Work. But much still remains unsaid. McNamara learned about paedophilia, drug dealing and police corruption at high levels, but only some names can be named. Some because they have died, for example John Marsden, solicitor and member of the police board, who died of cancer, and Frank R. Kell, Lord Mayor of Wollongong, who was murdered, each accused of paedophilia, but others are alive and could sue. Dirty Work is a true story, but there is still enough unaddressed corruption to ensure that not all the truth can yet be told. Well, ain't that the truth? And this review of Glenn McNamara's book Dirty Work was published in 2010, July 2010, so it'll be interesting to see what Whistleblowers Australia will have to say next about the ongoing Glenn McNamara saga. Now, another interesting story emerged this week relating to the alleged murder of former assistant AFP Commissioner Colin Winchester. And many of you will remember the long-running saga of the Colin Winchester murder and the David Eastman conviction. Now, some interesting things have been said by former Northern Territory Chief Justice Brian Martin, who's just published his review of the Eastman-Winchester affair, and it certainly rings some bells over here in Western Australia, and I'm sure in other states around the country, relating to police corruption and fabricated evidence. And here's a couple of the things that Justice Martin has said. He recommended Eastman's conviction be quashed and he be granted a pardon. The substantial miscarriage of justice at his trial should not be allowed to stand uncorrected, he said. Substantial miscarriage of justice. Now, this guy's been in jail for over 19 years. Justice Martin found Mr. Barnes' gunshot residue evidence lacked proper scientific basis and was deeply flawed. Sounds to me like the Western Australian police have been getting their evidence training over there in the ACT. Justice Martin said Eastman's guilt was determined on the basis of deeply flawed forensic evidence in circumstances where he was denied procedural fairness. Boy, almost sounds like a Perth kangaroo court. As a consequence of the substantial miscarriage of justice, the applicant has been in custody for almost 19 years. Now, here's another situation of the many wrongful convictions and imprisonments that go on around this nation state and its various commercial state entities on an almost weekly basis. And of course, here at Ozresistance, we've got a list of names of people that are being framed up now and waiting to go into jail. Unbelievable. Absolutely disgraceful. We'll be crossing to our special guest here in a minute, who, as promised, was last week, is a CPO, lovely lady named Debra Bentley. And after the cross, we'll be introducing our new segment, which is the Dodgy Public Officer of the Week. So that should be quite interesting.
Okay, well, last week we interviewed an interesting gentleman, Michael Brucewitz from Luke's Army, who had quite a harrowing story and some details about the Ordo Templi Orientis and a lot of corruption in the child protection agencies around the nation. And this week our special guest is a lovely lady called Debra Bentley, CPO, the Commonwealth Public Official, and we're always welcome CPOs on our show. And Debra's got quite a harrowing story of her own. It's along the same lines as what Michael Brucewitz has already spoken about, but in other ways Debra's story is even more compelling. And we've got Debra on the line now. Hello Debra, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good. And yourself? I know you've been through the wars over there in New South Wales, and just give us in your words the background of what's going on.
Well, in 1989 I discovered an organised paedophile ring operating within a church, and the church at the time was called the Christian Life Centre and Young Street, Waterloo in Sydney. It's since changed its name to Hillsong Church, which is very widely known and growing exponentially everywhere. Now, what I do know about this church, behind the scenes, as with a lot of churches with the child abuse, but then this one isn't your average garden variety, what I term garden variety, which is the normal sort of pedophile one-on-one with a child. This is very sinister, it's evil. We're talking satanic ritual abuse here. We're talking kidnap and murder of children. One of the children that were identified in this investigation as being one of the children that they ritually sacrificed and murdered, and her name was Helen Karapides, who disappeared from Marrickville in Sydney. Now, Helen is still listed as a missing child on the police missing persons list, and no investigation has taken place to my knowledge of this child. The witnesses involved in this organised paedophile ring were children at the time. Even though it was reported to police and there was a so-called investigation, the children were never taken to the sites to identify the locations. No forensic examination took place. Nothing. In fact, the investigation focused on discrediting the whistleblowers, i.e. myself and my family.
I'll just stop you there for a second. Deborah, we've got a bit of interference on the line. You're not in the flight path of an airport there, are you?
No, I'm not.
No, that's right.
It's a very quiet area.
Yeah, it's gone now. It's probably our friends from the establishment having a bit of a listen in on the side, but the interference is gone now, so I'll let you continue.
Yeah, the investigation involved actually Interpol, United States, I think it was FBI, and which we also know now is involved in child trafficking, such as finders and whatnot, which is interesting. And I think CIA, as well as Australia's law enforcement agencies. But we're talking 1990 here, when the investigation took place. Now, subsequent to the investigation, I was taken into, after attempts on my life and attempts to grab my children, we were taken into witness protection and for our own safety, so to speak. So they told me at the time. I was very naive then. And I was told I'd get a new identity. Sounds like our friends are back.
Yes. Yeah, it's gone again.
Yeah, funny that. Anyway, I was given a so-called new identity, and so were my children. But after a while, I learned that the documents they gave us were not valid, were not recorded, weren't registered anywhere. We couldn't get passports, we couldn't get security clearances, I couldn't get married, neither could the children as they grew up. Over the years, several attempts on my life, more than several, numerous attempts on my life, and it wasn't until 2012 that I actually learned that we were never recorded at all. And I also found out that my original identity, which supposedly the police told me initially would either be removed, some would be removed altogether from the system, and other aspects were supposed to be held in secure police custody, were actually being used by persons unknown. So someone out there has been impersonating me under my real identity and committing offences. And I also discovered when I started getting my real identity back in order to get a passport and whatnot, because I couldn't get a passport either, couldn't leave my own country and travel or anything like that. I found they added another child to my Medicare account that I didn't know anything about. Now, I didn't have this child, and I don't want to end up the next Kelly Lane saying, we've got a murder case on you because, this missing child, you must have disposed of them or something. So I wrote to my federal minister and whatnot and let the cat out of the bag in case that was what their little dirty trick was up their sleeve, and thwarted that one quite well. But I've been trying to expose that to get my identity fixed to get it back, and they've prevented me left, right and centre. Now, with all of this, we found out during the investigations...
Just let me stop you there. So the police it was the police that gave you another identity?
Yes.
And this is back when all this stuff came up?
In 1990.
Yes. And you're now left in limbo.
Yeah. I don't exist at law.
You don't exist at law, and apparently from what you've told me in the past, the Witness Protection Act wasn't even in force at the time they gave you this so-called identity. No,
there was no Witness Protection Act in place at the time. There was no legislative authority for them to do what they did. In actual fact, it's a breach of the Crimes Act here in New South Wales, Crimes Act 1900, Section 337, which is false instruments issued by public servants, which rendered us persona non grata and rendered us stateless. We didn't exist at law. Unable to do anything. We couldn't get Centrelink because we couldn't produce a valid birth certificate. I mean, the situation was basically, from what I understand it to be now, is that the reason I was never recorded was because they were going to eliminate us. We were meant to disappear. And whoever they had agreed to step into my shoes, they already had it all set up with the other child and everything else. So it's an interesting turn of events, how I've sort of somehow along the way, from one way or another, discovered what they've been up to, but it's only circumstantial evidence. I can't actually prove their intent, but given what I've found, I mean, it's not hard to put two and two together.
Yes, well, and all of this effort, and, you know, destroying people's lives and all this, also that they don't have to investigate the central problem, which is this devil-worshipping church and sacrificing children.
Yeah.
Well, obviously there's some high-profile people connected to it, isn't there?
Oh yes, I do. Oh yes, I'm quite aware of that, and also the money trails. That's why they use the international agencies, was to trace the money trails, which the task force at the time told me that the money trails fizzled out overseas. Now we're talking millions of dollars here in snuff movies, child porn, and you name it.
Yes, and all happening right here in New South Wales.
Oh yeah, and around the country. It's not just here in New South Wales. This is happening everywhere here. This is not just a national problem, it's an international problem. It's not just local here in New South Wales, it's national and it's international.
Yes. Now Michael Brucewitz pointed to the Ordo Templi Orientis. Do you think they might be connected in this as well?
I have no idea. I don't have any evidence of that.
Right.
I'll only speak of what I have evidence of, that I can back up and prove.
Fair enough.
And I'm quite capable of doing that very well, as you've seen some of my documentation to back up what I'm saying, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now.
Yes, yes. And I believe you've been to court recently, and there's finally been a bit of backpedaling on the part of the state.
Yes. I'm actually in the Supreme Court again next week. I filed a notice of motion to add another party to my case, and the Justice Adams has reserved his judgment for Tuesday, and the notice of motion will be heard on Wednesday. Now, I have implicated the Attorney General of New South Wales, the Police Commissioner, the Minister for Family Community Services over here, what they call DOCS, Department of Community Services, which is one of the departments who steal children. By the way, they tried to take mine off me to shut me up in the beginning, and I told them that if they tried that, they'd be in for everything they didn't want to wish for.
Well, it's a big reputation, DOCS, but those people that you've named, well, they're obvious. The buck stops with those people, doesn't it?
I've also charged the magistrates at the local court for refusing to allow evidence into the court for myself, because what I didn't have the money for a case, to run a case initially, and I didn't know enough about law either. So I hired damn solicitors, which are lawyers, which I'll never do again. They're damn liars, they protect the Crown. Who milked me dry and who tried to set me up to fail and filed nothing to sort the problem out. So I eventually learned enough along the way. I've been studying for years now to how to proceed with this myself. And so I've charged them as well, because what they have committed here in the local courts here with the traffic matters that I tried to get into the court to present the issue of lack of valid identity, that we didn't exist for them to help me fix the problem. All they did was try and punish me further, and the police was threatening me to my face on several occasions now. One officer in particular, his name is Christopher Hertak over here, he's a New South Wales police officer, has actually said straight to my face, "We're going to get you." And another officer, his name is Sergeant Calverley, in the Relevant police station. He has actually said to me that they never know what's going to happen to me. I could have a heart attack or something. So I don't know what they're going to try next, but it's very possible they might actually end my life, given the numerous attempts on my life already. I've been targeted by car accidents, I've been shot at, I've been poisoned, I've had my food tampered with in my house, I've had them coming in and out of my house, taking documents and things out of here and things like that. So, you know, but what they don't realise is that I have copies of everything, and they're placed not only within Australia with other people, but they're also around the world. I mean, thank God we have the internet these days.
Yes. Well, they'd love to shut the internet down, wouldn't they? That's why our Ozresistance network is certainly aligned with the Internet Defence League. But everything you've just described, and I'm glad you named the names, because that's what we're about on the Ozresistance network. That's naming the names and getting it out there for these people, so these people can't hide behind the facade of their police station or their corporate government department and with their ABN numbers. You know, this is common law. It needs to be one-on-one, and these people need to be shamed. And we intend over the coming weeks to get in a lot of people's faces with our cameras, and we'll be putting them on air.
I have told the local magistrates down here and the local registrar where I live that I'll be seeing them very shortly, either in the Supreme Court or the High Court, because I'm going to do them under tort law for the harm that they have caused us, for knowing the situation. Because the last magistrate down here where I am, her name is Magistrate Mary Ryan, who was basically a newbie and allowed the Crown solicitors, because this lot, the police, when they did me for the traffic matters, they hired, when I put subpoenas into the court to get all this information, to put it into a court to say what was going on here, that I had no valid identity, that it was actually identity theft, that they rendered us stateless and whatnot, which is against international law, and it's basically reducing us to a slavery-like status, which is a breach of Commonwealth law as well. That's Criminal Code 1995, Section 270 and 271. And it reduced us to a position of almost like an illegal immigrant, you know, but we couldn't get qualifications or anything like that. So I've told them that I will see you either in the Supreme Court or the High Court, and I hope you've got a nice house.
Yes. And just for our listeners' benefit, I'll just elaborate a little bit, and we can't say too much because there's court proceedings underway, but my understanding is they attacked your driver's licence. You still had a common law right to drive, and you still had a need to drive to travel because of your daily commitments and your children. So you travelled under your real name, and they then thought, well, we can get her again, and they've tried to charge you with fraud for using your real name.
Yes, I actually cancelled the licence in the false name that they gave me that didn't exist, that was never real. And I had that in writing and stamped by the RTA over here that it was received. I'd also sent, for about 12 months or more before that, emails to the Minister for Roads and also the Police Minister and the Attorney General and the Premier to remove all the names, all the contracts with the government under the name of Bentley. And they refused to do so. So in the end I just said, well, bugger this, I'm going to get my real name back so I can actually, you know, have a valid identity again and get a passport and all the rest of it. So I went and got my licence back under my real name, and then the police tried to charge me with fraud.
Yes. Well,
you know, they put it down they actually perjured themselves, knowingly and willfully giving false evidence to the court to obtain a conviction, stating that the name I obtained the licence in was my maiden name. But the fact is, I've never been married. Never been legally married. I've been lawfully married. I had a common law wedding, marriage, and but I've never had a licence from the state. Thank God I never did. But the police actually perjured themselves, and that is another aspect that will be going before a higher court very soon. And I'll be charging the officers concerned, the Crown Solicitor's Office for fraud, extrinsic fraud and intrinsic fraud, and the magistrate for upholding it and denying me my rights.
Well, good on you, Deborah. And look, I've got to tell you, pretty much everything you've described here today is the MO, the modus operandi that we're hearing from dozens and hundreds even activists around the country. They seem to be following a script, these corrupt police authorities, and fabricating evidence out of thin air, perjuring themselves. They just don't care.
No. And look, I went through the docs issue in the beginning when I first reported it, what I knew, what I discovered about the paedophilia and the murders and whatever else. Docs went after me. Now, luckily I've got a bit of street smarts, I've also got an intelligence, but for those people who don't know as much about the system or corruption and aren't as open, they're in a very vulnerable position. I was very lucky they didn't actually get my kids from me. But anyone else who is vulnerable, they will target you to steal your kids, to either traffic your children and put them in the hands of their VIP pedophile mates, or they'll use your children as a weapon to force you to do something, such as silence you or control you in some way, which is what they tried to do to me.
Well, Luke's Army has certainly got a lot of evidence about that, Deborah, and got to thank you very much for coming on the show, and we'll be monitoring your plight over the next couple of weeks, and certainly the outcomes of your pending court cases. That was Debra Bentley speaking to us from New South Wales in the Southern Highlands. He's been waging a long battle about her own identity and the victimisation she's suffered for the crime of reporting a satanic cult network that her own children had been witnessing. Now, our next segment is, just before we close, is our Dodgy Public Officer of the Week. Our Dodgy Public Officer of the Week this week is Western Australian Family Court Chief Judge Stephen Thackeray, and we'll be reporting certainly more on that man later on with some compelling anecdotal and video evidence. Okay, that's all we have for today. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Bill Bibbulmun, coming to you from our underground studio in Perth. So remember, stay safe, stay active, and keep up the good fight. Until next week, bye for now.